Good evening, everyone. My name is Medina, and I'm really excited for you all to be joining in on the Statewide Chambers webinar. And it's oriented around the NJEDA's COVID-19 Small Business Emergency Assistance Program, which is currently active for pre-registration. And I'm really always impressed by how our state comes together, and the leaders of these chambers are heroes to me doing the work every day. And so I'm going to allow them to do an introduction before we get into the actual presentation. So I would like to allow Luis de la Hoz, the chairman of the Statewide Hispanic Chamber, to say a few words about the chamber and also the initiative that's happening across the state.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. We're really happy to be here. We are the voice of 125,000 Latino small business owners that call New Jersey home. And we are really happy to have this opportunity for our members. Especially, I was like almost with teary eyes when I saw the word micro enterprises, because I had been pushing for that for the past just 10 years, but it's very interesting because many of the members, they really are micro businesses and they are desperate, they need the services. And I have been very vocal telling Tim Sullivan and all the team of the EDI, the great work that they did to scale from 500 to over 20,000 applications. And that's the reason because we are here, because we know that this is relevant for our community. Thank you very much, and we will spread the word as much as we can.
No, thank you so much, Luis, and for the Statewide Hispanic Chamber for the work that you do in advocating for the community and everyone at large. It's sorely needed, especially during these times, to have champions like you. I would love to segue it now to another amazing person that I've gotten to work alongside, which is Joseph Renga, the president of the New Jersey LGBT Chamber of Commerce, to give a welcome.
Thank you, Medina. It is certainly great to be here tonight. Thank you for asking us to participate. It's important to us, and it's important to us to partner with all of the chambers. There's a few on here tonight that we have partnered with on individual events. It is really important for small businesses to band together now as a group of people and through their chambers to make sure that we get all of the support that we need from the community, from the government, and in this rough time, and to maybe reconfigure our businesses and to just keep working to help each other stay in existence. That's the really tough thing, is to stay alive. We can all deal with maybe a downturn in business, but we all want to remain active. So these things that are going on now, the events that you pull together like this is fantastic stuff. And we're just really, really glad to participate.
And we are totally glad to have you, Joe. Thank you so much for everything you do for our LGBT community and for business at large. What I think it'd be great is segueing, because I think there's such cross interest in us all working together. So I'd love to turn it over to Francisco, who I get to work alongside in different capacities, who is the head of the Veterans Chamber. Francisco.
Thank you, Medina, and good evening, everyone. I am humbled and honored to serve as president of the New Jersey State Veterans Chamber of Commerce, and we represent the brave men and women who served our country and decided to raise and grow businesses here in the state of New Jersey. We are honored to partner with a collection of leaders for their respective chambers, and more importantly, the EDA. Us service members, we can conduct any mission. We can do anything that you tell us to, but to be honest with you, we can't do much without funding, right? And that's where the New Jersey EDA comes in. I'll keep my remarks short. Honored to partner with everyone. Medina, back to you, and thank you.
Oh, no, Francisco, thank you. It's great to work with you as well. And for everyone watching, we have come to the portion that I am sure that we're all waiting to be. It's the introduction of Tim Sullivan, who I am fortunate to work alongside Tim and his team during this time. So Tim is the president of the NJEDA, and he really is doing work that I think is sorely needed, and looking at being equitable in the way that the NJEDA and the state at large is helping small businesses, myself included, in the way that we all weather through COVID together. So I would like to take it over, Tim, please.
Thanks, Medina, and thanks for those really kind words, and more importantly, thanks for everything you're doing to help us get the word out here.
Hey, Tim, sorry to interrupt you. Just you're a little low.
Oh,
You're
sorry.
just a little low.
Is that any better? Awesome.
Yes.
Well, I thought you were going to interrupt me to tell me that John Harmon had logged on. I want to hand the mic to him, to my friend John, to let him make sure he gets a chance to say hey before we get into all the weeds here. So if it's okay with you, Medina, can we throw it over to John?
Yes, no, please go over to John Harmon, president of the African American Chamber of Commerce, friend to all. We're welcoming everybody to just talk about the opportunity that the NJEDA and how all the chambers are banding together to help small business.
Well, first of all, I'm just honored and delighted to be amongst this distinguished cast, especially my man Luis. And Luis, I apologize for being late because I know it's, you're going to reprimand me later, but to our leader, Tim Sullivan, and I mean that wholeheartedly. Tim has demonstrated not only that he hears us, but he and his folks are working tirelessly to be creative, given policy in the state of New Jersey to ensure that our constituency get access to the requisite resources and opportunities. So this is a tremendous opportunity for us all to leverage, to make a difference for our people. Our people, as you know, are struggling day in and day out, and every day we're looking for someone to just hear us and respond. And I have to commend Tim and the Murphy administration as well. So we have a tough road to hoe, but it's encouraging just to be a part of what we're experiencing now in partnership with you all in the EDA. So I'll throw it back and then we'll pick up when we get called upon again. Thank you.
The most influential people of color, we are blessed to have you here today.
Great. Well, thank you, John, for those very kind words. And it's an honor to be with everyone. And it's great to be with so many friends and colleagues that we work with so often, not just in this crisis, but on all kinds of things before and now during, and someday hopefully soon after this crisis. I'm joined by a couple of colleagues from the EDA, Elizabeth Limbrick, who's I'm going to tag in a moment to help me out with this presentation, as well as Rachel Gomat, who helps do so many things that makes our social media go round. She's our social media guru, among lots of other things. And I'll try and keep it relatively quick because I know it's some combination of dinner time and Miller time for everybody right now. And so want to make sure we'll get through this. It's important, but want to make sure we get be respectful of everyone's time. Let me just say at the outset, Governor Murphy, I think, has been right from the get-go in describing COVID-19 as first and foremost a public health crisis, but right behind it, right hot on its heels, it's an economic crisis, and it's an economic crisis that, like the public health crisis, is being borne disproportionately by communities of color. It's being borne disproportionately by small businesses, and particularly small businesses led by people of color and the LGBT community as well, and the veteran community folks. Businesses that, when the sun is shining and the wind is at our backs, still don't have the same opportunities and same resources that the rest of the economy has. And so we have been really focused on, as Medina and others have noted, trying to work really hard. I'm not saying, put my arms in the air and declaring victory, but working like heck. Since I started working for Governor Murphy, I stopped using bigger words. I'll say working like heck. I'll say heck. Working quite a bit to make sure we're trying to get resources where they really need it and where other resources aren't getting. And we're by no means done, by no means perfect, by no means declaring victory, but I think we've made some decent progress there. What we're really here to talk about, I want to jump into it, get into the meat of this, which is the $70 million of incremental grant money that's becoming available. Elizabeth, Rachel or Elizabeth, whoever's got the slides, if you want to pop them up. I was with Governor Murphy, Lieutenant Governor Oliver, Senate President Sweeney, and Speaker Coughlin, as well as Senator Menendez and Congressman Malinowski last Tuesday in Hillsborough to talk about this allocation of additional small business relief money that we're now here to talk about today, which continues, thank you, this is exactly the slide I wanted, which continues to build upon what we've been up to over the last 7 or 8 months, 6 or 7 months, whatever it's been, around small business support in the COVID-19 context. So much of the response to COVID-19 is really complex. I'm in awe of the folks who are working on how do you come up with a vaccine, and how do you reorient the education system to teach kids over distance, and how do you solve the digital divide, and all these big challenges. And in some ways, the small business piece of it is really important, but it's a bit more simple. They need money. They need money to survive and get through and pay expenses and keep their folks hired to get through this terrible period, and survive and then come out the other end to thrive again. And so we've been focused on having a range of different kinds of tools to support different kinds of small businesses. We've got grants, we've got loans. We're partnering with groups like CDFIs, partnering with groups like Francisco and John's and Luis's, and we should add the LGBT chamber to that group of providing technical assistance to folks when they're applying for SBA programs, which are much larger size dollars than ours, and also pretty difficult to navigate. And so we wanted to make sure that particularly historically disadvantaged businesses had a fair or better shot at accessing those funds. And so we worked really closely with the African American Chamber, the Statewide Hispanic Chamber, the Veterans Chamber, to support those businesses in accessing those funds. But importantly, in aggregate, if you give me the next slide, please, Rachel. In total, as we sit here right now, and this is actually stale by a couple of days, we've supported more than 21,000 small businesses directly through the EDA programs, having gotten over $75 million, over $76 million of funds on the street. And that number ticks up. Both those numbers tick up every day. So we're probably close to 22,000 and probably close to 78 or 79 million by today. And just to dimension that, in a normal EDA year, we'll work with 300, 400, 500 businesses directly, meaning when I say work with them, I mean, provide funding or other programmatic resources. So to do 21,000 plus heading to 30 or 40,000 is just an extraordinary expansion of our scope. And I think indicative of how Governor Murphy has prioritized how important supporting small business is in this moment, because we've had to stop on a dime, and it's been a privilege, but we've had to stop on a dime and stand these programs up. Next slide, please. Importantly, and I think harmonious with why we're having the discussion we're having tonight with this wonderful group of partners, we've really tried to ensure equity and increase the accessibility of these funds. The list of programs that don't focus on or serve well businesses owned or led by people of color, women, veterans, and the LGBT community is unfortunately far too long. We've worked really hard to get the funding where we think it has the biggest impact and where there are the biggest needs. So in phase 2, we're about to talk about phase 3. I promise we'll get to the news on what we're doing here with phase 3 in a second. But with phase 2, 20% of the funding that was awarded through that program went to businesses that identified as minority-owned, 23% to women-owned, 2% as veteran-owned. You can't add those up because some of those, some folks are, you might have a veteran-owned firm that's also a minority-owned firm. But those are, compared to other programs, those are pretty, positive step in the right direction kind of numbers. 36% of the grants that were approved in phase 2 went to businesses in opportunity zone eligible census tracts. We're going to carry forward. We reserved at least 33% of the funding for businesses located there. Those are high poverty, high unemployment, low income census tracts all across the state. There's 750 or so of them. We reserved at least a third of the funding in phase 2 for those census tracts. We will carry that forward and continue that with the phase 3 funding that we're about to talk about today. Next slide, please. So what we're here to talk about today, the main dish here, phase 3. So $70 million, 70 million, with a third of that funding set aside for businesses in those opportunity zone eligible census tracts. We're going bigger size businesses can apply this time, so up to 50 full-time equivalents. We're doing some larger award sizes for a combination of reasons. One, the needs are very large, and also we're up against a pretty tight timeline here with congressionally mandated period of having to get this funding out the door by December 30th of this calendar year, and it's October 21st. So there's a team of folks working around the clock to actually get this done. And then we're really focusing on two particular types of businesses, restaurants and micro businesses. And I appreciate Luis's comments earlier. You certainly heard him and John and lots of others loud and clear that micro businesses, something like 90%, 90+% of minority-owned firms are some form of micro business, either a sole proprietorship or a single member LLC or some of the other variants of micro businesses. And we should just be, candid about it. They're not able to access the same programs. They don't have the resources, the scale, the support to access these programs, even the best intentioned ones, without a real focus. And so we've ring fenced $15 million just for micro businesses under 5 employees. $35 million is ring fenced for restaurants. Restaurants obviously having a really hard time, and with the winter coming, obviously but no means out of the woods yet. That's, I think, driven more by consumer behavior than anything else. I saw a survey that just popped tonight in New York City, which is not New Jersey, but not a huge distance away from here. Something like 56% of respondents to some survey, I forget who did it, said that they're not comfortable eating in restaurants right now indoors, which is really hard. That's a really hard fact pattern for the restaurant industry. So we want to make sure we're leaning into supporting restaurants at a time when they really need the revenue really badly. And then a remaining $20 million of funds for basically all other small business types, Main Street businesses up to 50 employees, 50 full-time equivalents. Nonprofits are eligible for all these, and Elizabeth will hand it to in 10 seconds. We'll go through all these in detail, but again, 3 separate buckets within the 70 million. The most important thing, other than getting to see great leaders who lead the chamber share their perspective on these things, the most important thing from this, lead the chambers, the most important thing to take away from this webinar tonight, whenever you're watching it, you've got to pre-register. Pre-registration is a mandatory step in this process. It is open. It's been open since Monday morning at 9 a.m. It will be open until Tuesday, October 27th at 5 o'clock. You have to pre-register. If you don't pre-register and you wake up on the morning of the 29th or the 30th or the 2nd and you want to log on and try and apply, you will not be able to. It is mandatory. One more time for folks in the back. It is a mandatory pre-registration process. You've got to log on to cv.business.nj.gov sometime between now and October 27th at 5 p.m. More than 10,000 businesses already have. It's not first come, first serve, so don't sweat if you haven't done it yet. It's just you've got to get in, you've got to get your ticket to the dance between now and October 27th. And then it's first come, first serve on the mornings of the 29th, the 30th, and the 2nd. You've got to pre-register. If you don't pre-register, you cannot apply. With that, I don't mean to be sort of a school teacher, yelling at you, but it's important. You gotta pre-register. With that, I'm going to hand it to my friend and colleague Elizabeth Limbrick, who's going to tell you a little bit more about some of these programs in more detail. So Elizabeth, over to you.
All right, thank you, Tim. So, a couple things to take away before we even get started. Again, we've increased it so that businesses up to 50 full-time equivalents can apply this time around. So this is a big deal. We've increased those grant sizes. So the minimum grant award now is $5,000. And that, even if you're a sole proprietor, company of one, you can get $5,000. And our maximum grant amount under this phase is $20,000. We're again going to target those opportunity zone eligible census tracts because we have found that that is a really good way to get funds into the folks that need it most, the historically disadvantaged communities. And as Tim said, the pre-registration is just so important. It is open now. It is open until 5 p.m. on October 27th. You have to get in and pre-register now. This part, there's 2 parts. So pre-registration, you have some time. You have until October 27th. Don't sweat it too bad. Just make sure you're complete by October 27th with the pre-registration. And I'm going to walk you through that whole process. That part is not first come, first serve. The second part I'm going to tell you about, where you have the different buckets that for the restaurants, the micro businesses, etc. That registration, that application process is first come, first serve. So not to be confused on those 2 pieces. Okay, so on the first slide, let's see, the restaurant slide. All right. Here we have, and what you'll see is if you look at the baseline eligibility, we're going to have pretty much the same baseline eligibility for all three buckets that we're going to talk about, whether that's the restaurants, the micro businesses, or the other small businesses. The only thing different is bolded on this slide, which is for the restaurants, you would be classified with what we call a NAICS code, a North American Industry Classification System code. And the first three digits would be 722. And you can look that up. We have a tool on our website, the COVID business portal that Tim has already referenced. We have, you can Google it, and you can probably look at your tax documents to determine if that applies to you. And for this part of the program, we have $35 million going to restaurants. You can see on here the grant award sizes, 5 or fewer, we call them full-time equivalents. So you can have multiple part-times that equal to 1 full-time, right? So we're not saying just, the total number of headcount of employees. We're saying those that add up to a full-time equivalent. And we have an estimator, which I will get to later, where you can determine the number of full-time equivalents that you have. But 5 or fewer, you get a grant up to 10,000. Between 6 and 25, it's up to 15,000. Between 26 and 50, it's up to $20,000. One of the key things to take away, again, we talked about the pre-registration, that goes for all of the buckets, that you have to be pre-registered by the 27th. But the actual application for the restaurant opens at 9 a.m. on Thursday, October 29th. And that part is a first come, first served basis. So you want to be first in line. You want to be online, ready to go at 9 a.m. for your application for that. Now, as far as the eligibility, I'll walk you through it on this slide. I'm not going to go through it on each of the other slides, but for all of them, this all applies. You have to have a physical location in New Jersey. You have to have a physical location in our state. You have to be registered to do business in New Jersey. You have to be in good standing with the Department of Labor. You'll have to fill out and certify a debarment and legal questionnaire. You have to certify that you have had a negative impact from the COVID emergency. And I think just about every business can certify to that. And then you have to certify your intent not to lay off any workers. We recognize that folks have had to lay off workers, but you have to certify that you're doing your very best to not have to lay off folks. Next slide. So this one is our micro business bucket. So this is for businesses that have 5 or fewer full-time equivalents. And again, same eligibility requirements for all micro businesses, because it's between 1 and 5 FTEs. All of them get the $5,000. So that's the maximum grant award amount, is $5,000 for a micro business. So whether you're 1 or 5 FTEs, the grant amount is $5,000. And applications for this, again, you have to pre-register, but the actual applications for this will open on Friday, October 30th at 9 a.m. Again, first come, first served. And I think I neglected to mention on the other one, but I'll mention it here. On each of these buckets, we're setting aside 1/3 of the funds for those businesses that are located in those opportunity zone eligible census tracts. And this is we have $15 million for this program. Next slide. And then our last program is for all those other small businesses. So the businesses that aren't restaurants and that are larger than 5 FTEs. So between 6 and 50 full-time equivalents. We have $20 million for this. Again, 1/3 set aside for those opportunity zone eligible census tracts. We have the same eligibility criteria. The number of full-time equivalents will determine your grant award amount. Again, we do have a grant size estimator available. Between 6 and 25, you're looking at up to $10,000. Between 26 and 50, you're looking at up to $15,000. Again, you must pre-register. And on this one, we open the application on Monday, November 2nd at 9 a.m. Next slide. So Tim mentioned this earlier. We have really been working hard to address economic justice issues, and our goal is really to reach a broader, diverse landscape of business owners in New Jersey, and we're employing some very intentional strategies to ensure equity and increase our accessibility. You know, I think one thing that often gets lost when we start talking about minority and women-owned businesses is just how vital they are to our economy and how they benefit everyone. These businesses provide critical services to our communities. They are employers that help bring stability to economically marginalized communities. Yet, as Tim referenced earlier, Black, brown, and women entrepreneurs cannot always access funding, even when the economy is booming. So again, to ensure funding is going to these communities that need it most, this is where we are targeting 1/3 of the funding to be set aside for those businesses in the 715 census tracts that were eligible to be selected for the New Jersey Opportunity Zones. You know, these really are those census tracts that are the most distressed communities. And again, we do have a tool you can access on our COVID business portal. If you go into the FAQs, you can find that map that shows these census tracts. But that said, you don't need to do that. We will do the work for you. So when you do complete your pre-registration and your application, based on the address you put in there, we'll determine whether or not you actually are in one of those opportunity zones. I also wanted to mention that we've been really aggressive in targeting and marketing in our outreach campaign. And, you know, obviously we're very proud to be working with all of you tonight. We're working with New Jersey's top marketing firms, including Medina is City, who is on here, and Terra Dedal Group. And we're just, you know, they've been really great in helping us to reach beyond our traditional and to broaden our outreach to other groups that have been less likely to be touched in the past. And both of those firms are minority owned, one is woman owned, one is LGBT owned, and they both have expertise and experience in communicating with and reaching kind of those diverse entrepreneurs and small business owners. So it's, you know, it's been a pleasure to be able to work with them. I did want to mention we do have some language assistance available. This is another really important piece of our program, because if we want to reach that broader landscape of business owners, you know, they need to feel that they're included and they're invited to the table, and they need to understand what's going on. So we are providing the online pre-registration and application in both English and Spanish, but then we're also going to offer applicants access to interpretation services to support, I think it's a total of 11 languages. They're listed here on this slide. And then we will have translated versions of the application made available in advance of the opening. And then those applicants can also contact our language help at NJEDA.com email to receive a call within 1 business day from a representative who can communicate with them in their primary language. Next slide. And this is just an example of what that would look like if you go to our website. Next slide. We are now getting a little more into the nitty-gritty here. So in walking through, you know, when you get ready to do your pre-registration, be prepared. View our sample application on our COVID business portal. So here it is. It's listed right here for you, cv.business.nj.gov. You'll want to have your contact information and your primary business address ready and available. And then you will need to know if you received other government assistance, whether that's from us, whether that's from the federal government, county government, municipal, and even insurance. And be prepared to provide information regarding your status and uses and amounts for those funds. And the reason we do this is because we're using federal dollars, the CARES Act money, to provide these programs. And the federal government has rules around how these things get used, and they have something called duplication of benefits. And it basically says you can't fund the exact same expense using federal dollars twice. So they're very specific though. When we talk about that, it doesn't mean that just because you use money for payroll once, you can't use it for payroll again. It's if you used payroll for John Doe for April, you can't use this again, for John Doe, for payroll for April, but you could use it for May, you could use it for Jane Doe, that kind of thing. You can use it for rent. It has to be a different expense. And so we'll have to take a look at that. So that's why we're going to be asking you these questions. You'll also want to know your business's full legal name, which is going to be the one that you used when you registered with the state of New Jersey. You'll want to know your entity type, whether that's sole proprietor, LLC, S Corp, C Corp. You'll need to know the year established, your tax ID, your employment numbers for the first quarter of 2019 all the way through the second quarter of 2020. Again, we talked about that NAICS code earlier, and you'll want to know your 2019 revenue, as well as being able to tell us how much revenue you've lost due to COVID-19. I did want to point out again that pre-registration is already open. You have until the 27th to complete it. I think it would be helpful for folks if you have your tax returns available and you have your business formation documents handy. That will help you be able to answer a lot of these questions. I also recommend, going to our COVID business portal, looking at that sample application, and checking out our FAQs on that website as well. Next slide. Okay, so pre-registered applicants will need to return to the portal. So after you've done your pre-registration, you're going to go back and complete your application at the following schedule. So again, we've talked about this earlier. Restaurants are 9 a.m. on October 29th. Micro businesses, you're going to go back on Friday, October 30th, and small businesses go back Monday, November 2nd at 9 a.m. We're recommending that you get there as close. We're recommending you get there at 9 a.m. Be there, be ready to submit at that time, because it's quite possible that we will be oversubscribed for these, and you want to be first in line. Next slide. So this takes you through in great detail exactly what our pre-registration process looks like. And so I'm not going to spend a ton of time going through each of these slides. You will have a copy of these later. But the first thing here, you're going to register your email address. What we have been told is that you need to make sure, first of all, that you're using a good email. Make sure you make a note of your username and password, because you will need this to fill out your application later. And I have been told that you need to set up a whole new account this time. Even if you've done this before, you'll need to set up a new account. Next slide. This is setting up your profile. Again, make sure you use a good email, good phone number. If we need to get in touch with you to get more information, or even if it's to wire you money, you will want us to be able to find you. So if you're not operating out of your usual office and you're not able to get phone calls on your usual office phone, use a phone number where we can reach you. Next slide. So this is just like setting up any other account when you're doing e-commerce or something like that. You'll register, you'll put in your name, your email address, and click update. Next slide. Then you'll get your confirmation. So you're going to get an email from us. You're going to follow the instructions in that email, and then you're going to end up going back into our system to complete your pre-registration. One word of note, at one point when we first opened, we had really high volume, and it was a little slow for people to receive that email from us where they had to follow the instructions. We would ask that, just try and be a little bit patient in case we are experiencing high volume. It might take a few minutes to get that email. Next slide. Okay, now this is where we really start getting into the nitty gritty here on the pre-registration process. Next slide. This is your contact information. Again, use a good phone number. We're asking you here if you're the authorized signer, what your legal business name is, if you have doing business as, what that would be as well. Next slide. And this is your business address and whether or not this is a commercial location and whether or not it's a home-based business, both of which are eligible. We just need to know. Next slide. These are just some more details again. This is when your business was established. Are you still in operation as of the day that you're filling this out? This is important. Again, you know, under the Federal CARES Act rules, we wouldn't be able to give funds to a business that's no longer in operation. You, of course, have our deepest sympathies if that is the case, but be aware of that as you're answering this question. We ask, what is the ownership structure? We have a drop-down menu on that. Owners with more than 10% of an ownership share, we need you to list who those are. And if we're talking about a nonprofit here, you would need to list your board of directors here. Next slide. So this is more organization details. This is your EIN, your federal employee or employer identification number. This is really important. By the way, anytime you see that little I on the slide, you can click on that when you're in the registration and get more information. If you have more than one EIN, you can actually apply separately for additional grants for each EIN that you have. We ask for some certifications. You can check your registration status at the link provided. We're also asking for your WR30, your payroll information. If you're a micro business and don't have any WR30s, we understand that. But for those of you that do, we are asking all this information here. Next slide. More organization details. Okay, now this is about your full-time equivalents, FTEs in our language. This is about your annual revenue. Again, we have that grant eligibility estimator that can help you calculate the number of FTEs if you're employing part-time employees. Next slide. Here, it's simple. We're just asking if you filed business tax returns in New Jersey in 2018, 2019, or neither of those. We do note that some nonprofits might not be required to file tax returns if their revenues are under a certain threshold. Next slide. Here we're asking you to help us. We're asking you to self-identify whether you are a minority-owned, women-owned, veteran-owned, or disabled-owned company. And we're asking that information so that we can track ourselves and see how we're doing. So that we know if we're reaching those communities. This does not affect your ability to get one of these grants, but this is for us. Thank you. Next slide. More information about your business. We've talked about the NAICS code. You'll be entering that here. Which quarter have you had your highest employment? Now, the reason we're asking it this way is because we're going to use this to calculate your grant size. More employees, larger grant size. So we're trying to give you sort of the most beneficial scenario here. Next slide. All right. So there are a very few number of businesses that are not eligible for this grant program, and this slide gets exactly at that. So if we are asking, are you a gambling business? And by that we mean like a casino. We don't mean like a nonprofit who had a bingo night. Okay, this is like, you know, is this what your business is? Is it about gambling? Is it an adult business? Do you conduct auctions and bankruptcy sales, fire sales, going out of business? Is it a pop-up store? Is it outdoor storage? Do you conduct activities that may constitute a nuisance? And do you conduct business for illegal purposes? Any of those you would end up not being eligible. Next slide. So this is the signature and certification. You do an electronic signature and you sign here. Next slide. Congratulations, you have completed your pre-registration process. So we'll have all of your information ready and loaded, and then you will come back to complete your application on the date that we've talked about previously. Next slide. When you come back to complete your full application, these are the kinds of questions that we're going to be asking you. And again, this is going to be on first come, first serve basis, so you'll want to be prepared to answer these kinds of questions. So were you deemed an essential business based on Executive Order number 107? If you're a nonprofit, what type of nonprofit are you? Are you a 501c3, C4, etc.? We're going to want to know, to what capacity was your business able to reopen? We're going to want to know what other COVID assistance you have received. Again, that gets back to that duplication of benefits. And so that's federal, state, local, insurance. Again, we'll need to know, how much revenue have you lost due to COVID? What is your additional financial need as a result of COVID after your other COVID-19 assistance? And then what will the grant proceeds be used for if approved? Next slide. I mentioned these two estimators. So on this first slide, we have our grant size estimator. And again, you can access all of these at that COVID business portal that we've talked about. And this is a way for you to determine what size grant you will get. And then the next slide is our eligibility estimator. So this helps you determine whether or not you're eligible for one of these grants. Next slide. So I did want to take a moment to talk about some other program that we have going on. This is a new one we're initiating. We hear about it all the time now, personal protective equipment, or PPE. It's really a critical element to reopening and staying open. And we created this program in direct response to feedback that we got from the governor's Restart and Recovery Committee. One of the things we had heard was that micro businesses and small businesses really needed support to provide PPE to protect both their employees and their customers. We understand, there's been new challenges with the supply chain and with cost pressures. So this is a $24 million program. It's a public-private partnership, or a P3 kind of model. And you'll see here we have phase 1 and phase 2. So in the first phase, we have a tool that helps small businesses plan for determining how much PPE they'll need. And this was informed by talking to Department of Health and the CDC and OSHA and local and county health officials. And again, this is going to help you calculate how much PPE you'll need for your business. And it's at covid19.nj.gov/PPE access. For this, we've engaged a set of vendors that have guaranteed at least a 10% discount. We are curating the list of vendors, so to make your decision easier, all of the vendors will also be verified. And in addition to that, we're going to help subsidize the cost of New Jersey businesses 20 cents on the dollar if the vendors are buying PPE that's made in New Jersey. This is almost complete. We expect to roll this out and announce the vendors in the next couple weeks. I understand there may be some very large and familiar names on that list. And then phase 2 is $20.5 million for small and micro businesses to buy PPE. So on top of that 10% discount that you normally get, we just talked about in phase 1, you're going to get another 25% off for your bill, because we are subsidizing that. And that is going to be capped at $400 for most businesses, $500 for those in the OZ eligible census tracts. We say the best way to think of this is think of it like a coupon, and that you'll have 2 weeks to use that discount. And we'll have more information on that at that covid19.nj.gov/PPE access. Again, sometime in November, that should be rolling out. We think, by partnering with these major vendors, it's going to be very easy to use. No worries about duplication of benefits or keeping receipts. Our designated vendors are going to take care of all the paperwork on the back end. Next slide. We are open for Q&A. I guess, Medina, are you moderating the Q&A?
I sure am, Elizabeth. I sure am. And so, with that, what I wanted to do is actually allow for a moment for the actual heads of the chambers, for John, Francisco, Luis, and Joseph, to ask some questions that they've been fielding as they've been actively engaging their community first. So I would allow you and Tim to answer those questions. And in my capacity as moderating slash host, I would love to ask John, did you have any questions from the African American Chamber that you've been receiving that you'd like to field to Tim and Elizabeth?
Yeah, I think Elizabeth addressed it, but I'll state it again. One was clarity on the calculation of loss eligibility. And the other one, just if you can restate about if you've received previous resources, the PPP, the EIDL loan, or grants from the EDA. If you could just restate those, I think that would answer a lot of questions.
Okay, so let me answer the second part first, which is if you've received other grants. This gets back to that duplication of benefits question with the federal government. What we're saying, as long as you have an unmet need, something that hasn't been previously met with other dollars, you can use this funding. We're not going to reduce the size of your grant because of other grants that you may have had in the past, as long as you can show an unmet need that exceeds the size of the grant, right? And we're pretty sure that everybody can, because we know that the unmet need is really great out there. So that's, I think, kind of to the one question that you had. And then the other piece of it was like, how do I show the revenue lost? And I'm going to have to say, I don't know if Tim has a specific answer on that, but I think I'll let him answer.
Yeah, it's basically self-certification. So you're going to tell us what your revenues were in 2019. You're going to tell us what they were in 2020 over the same period. We're going to compare them. Presumably, it's going to be lower in 2020 and 2019. Your revenues are up in 2020. Godspeed, but you're probably not getting a grant. We will be checking that with, we'll be auditing that basically with taxation on the back end to make sure that fits with your taxes. If it fits with the revenues you're showing on your business taxes.
Perfect, because I know that was a question for sure. Thank you so much, John, for your question, and for Elizabeth and Tim fielding that one out. I'd love to give space for a question to come from Francisco, president of the Veterans Chamber, for either Tim or Elizabeth. Francisco?
Thank you, Medina. I think the question we receive often from veteran businesses, I think Tim alluded to it earlier in his comments, there's confusion about dates, pre-registration and actual application. So I think it's just important to stress that again so that everyone is clear, pre-registration and application dates.
Okay, happy to do that. And pre-registration is open now. So you can go on now. It closes October 27th at 5 p.m. The rolling application openings, I have to look at my notes. Restaurants are October 29th, 9 a.m. Micro businesses, October 30th, 9 a.m. All those others that don't fit into those other two buckets, November 2nd, 9 a.m. I would also just point out that I believe daylight saving time switch happens over that weekend. So be aware of that.
Perfect. Thank you.
Elizabeth is making sure you're ultra prepared. She is factored in daylight savings time. That is how the NJEDA is serving you all. Thank you so much, Francisco, for your question.
Well, let me just, can I jump in with one friendly amendment to that? You have to pre-register. I said this 64 times when I was speaking before. You cannot wake up on the morning of the 29th, the 30th, or the 2nd and think, hey, maybe I'll apply for the EDA grant program. That'll be cool. If you do not pre-register, you don't have an application to fill out on those days. You have to pre-register.
Pre-register. But we're going to say that over and over again. It's going to be the mantra. It's going to be the new tagline for the EDA. Moving over, I'd love to allow Joseph Renga, president of the NJ LGBT Chamber, to field questions to Elizabeth and Tim.
Well, I want to first thank both Elizabeth and Tim for giving us all this needful information. I think it's very thorough, and you've literally covered everything. The one thing that I hear from people in my constituency, the small business owners that I speak with, and when I talk to other chambers of commerce, is I'm hearing, and this is purely anecdotal, but I hear a lot about timeframes of response times and maybe lag times. Is there a way to set expectation levels for responses to applications, or getting feedback that my application wasn't completely filled out and things of that nature? I mean, from your perspective, from your side of the table, let's say, what are you seeing from that? Because that's the thing that I keep hearing from people as I speak to them.
Yeah, and those are fair questions, trending towards criticisms. I think that we've learned a lot from phase 2, and we're kind of redesigned the way the reason we're doing pre-registration is to enable us to do this, kind of peer behind the curtains a little bit here of how we do these reviews. The applications come in on the day the applications are submitted, and they go into one of 3 categories. Either everything kind of checks out easily and automatically, and it's basically an auto approve. It takes some time to go through them, but there's not a lot of oversight and discretion that goes through that. You can fail the test as well, and you get sort of automatically declined. And you answered a question wrong, you don't have an unmet need, whatever, you get bounced, you get declined. There's a whole big bucket in the middle of ones that require manual review. You answered one question that wasn't consistent with the other. You answered something that's inconsistent with so we cross-reference, for example, you give us your WR30 numbers, but we also look at the real WR30s. If they're different, you don't automatically get declined, but they're get put into what's called manual review. Our goal in this round is to have 75% be able to be automatically decisions one way or the other. That'll enormously improve our throughput. And so it's imaginable that we'll be able to start turning around decisions on grants within the first couple of days after the applications we start taking them. We'll also know, because of the pre-registration, we'll know how oversubscribed we are. We will be oversubscribed, I'm positive, but we'll know how oversubscribed we are, which will allow us to calibrate the pace at which we're doing these. So we have to get these out by December 30th. They have to be wired in your account if you're the recipient by December 30th. So, and we are still working through phase 2. It's worth noting. So there are approvals still happening, today, tomorrow, next week for phase 2 as well.
And I think we're bringing on some additional staff, quite a number of additional staff to help us.
Yeah, we're hiring up to 40 temporary new colleagues. Some of which I think half of them have already joined us, and bringing them on board to create some jobs the old-fashioned way by hiring people directly, at least on a temporary basis.
Thank you.
No, thank you so much, Joe, for your question, and thank you, Tim, again, and Elizabeth for being so specific. Luis, would you like to round out our questions from what you're receiving from your members?
Yes, I have one that was posted here on the Q&A plus texted to me, and is, does a single member LLC with not employees qualify for this grant? I also want, nobody mentioned immigration status, and the last thing, nobody described the process of the actual date of the 29/30 of the second, how the process looked like. Thank you.
I can take those. So answer 1, yes, single member LLC or sole prop with no employees is eligible. They'll be in the micro business category. So yeah, short answer to that was yes. With regard to immigration status, we don't ask our application does not make any inquiries with regard to immigration status. You do have to be registered with the state of New Jersey. So if you are unable to be registered with the state of New Jersey for whatever reason, you wouldn't be able to be eligible, but we don't ask questions about the employees, and that's not an area of inquiry for us. The third question was so we're finalizing the application like tonight into tomorrow morning with the actual question. We're going to publish the application in both English and Spanish for all 3 categories. Probably tomorrow. It could slip to Friday, but the full application. But with the switch to doing pre-registration, you're doing much more work in the pre-registration than you will be doing in the application day. And so the harder part, the more time-intensive part is the pre-registration, which, if you didn't hear me before, is mandatory. Everyone has to pre-register. But we'll have that on our website. We'll have that on cv.business.nj.gov. Probably tomorrow, potentially Friday.
Perfect, guys. And just to clarify for that, in the chat, we've made sure that the dates are there for you, that the actual link to the site is there for you guys. So just grab that from the chat so that you have it directly there. Um, Thank you so much to the chamber presidents for asking the questions, but also doing the work to represent small businesses and to help us as we get through COVID. For those who are attendees, I have taken your questions and I've summarized them, and I'm going to field them out in a lightning round for Elizabeth and for Tim. The from Lisa Ham, if you were denied for phase 2 grant, and will you be denied for the phase 3 grant? Are they connected? This business owner, it has appealed the denial, but it would be helpful to understand if this grant phase 3 is more inclusive than the prior phase, and I would love that answer from you guys.
The short answer is it depends on why you were declined. If you were declined because you're not registered with the state for whatever, and that still is the status, that's still going to be a problem. If you were declined because you didn't have enough unmet need in June, but now it's been another 4 hard months and you've got more unmet needs, that could be a different set of circumstances. Generally speaking, the rules, if you will, of eligibility are pretty much the same. And so if your application had a sort of for lack of a better word, a fatal flaw that made you ineligible, and that is still the case, you're going to probably have the same outcome. If it's a moment in time thing, I would certainly think about applying.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Tim, for that answer. Corinne asked, and think I know the answer, but I want to ask this question: do home-based businesses count as eligible, or does the physical location have to be outside of the home?
Home-based businesses are eligible.
It's always good to get these kind of answers out. How and Tim, you said this about looking at your tax returns for last year and weighing it against your revenues from this year. But I think this question has come up a couple more times about how do you determine the revenue loss due to COVID-19? Could you just one more time give that to the attendees?
Yeah, but you're going to tell us your revenue in 2019 and you're going to tell us your revenue in 2020. We're going to compare them. 2020 is probably going to be lower, depending on what kind of business you're in. And that'll be the unmet need. Most people will have way more unmet need than there will be resources available to fill those grants.
Thank you for that so much, Tim. Asias Rivera asked that they have a home-based business and an Uber business. However, I operate as a sole proprietor for both businesses. I file taxes on both of them with my social security number. Will I be able to apply for the grant for my 2 businesses, or will I need to get an EIN for one of my businesses so it doesn't confuse with my social security on the other business?
I think the answer to that question is you'll be able to apply once using the social, unless you have 2 different EINs or TINs, depending on how the business is structured. But that sounds like one application, not 2.
It does. And I think if you're trying to set up a new business now, you need to have the formation documents, I think, back to February
15th. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for answering those questions. Some other ones that have been asked, an attendee has asked, does Department of Labor apply to sole proprietors as well that use independent contractors?
So again, we look at your WR30 unless you don't file a WR30. That would put you, we were talking earlier about sort of manual review. If you're not a WR30 filer for all the reasons one might not be a filer of that form, that probably puts you in that manual review category because it's a little less easy and straightforward for us to compare the data.
Understood. Thank you so much for that, Tim. What if a business doesn't have an annual revenue report because the business started in the beginning of 2020? It was in operation for about 2 months before COVID-19 hit. And this question was from Corinne Bostic.
Yeah, it should be okay. Again, it's probably going to likely end up in that manual. It'll probably be a slower answer because it's a little more of an intricate review. But as long as you can demonstrate that you had contracts that were canceled, again, it's a little harder because you won't have something to compare it to, but if you can demonstrate you had contracts that were canceled or if your order closed. So for example, if you're a gym or something that was ordered closed until some period of time, that's, you were open January and February and then March through whenever was impacted, that'd be okay.
Understood. And then just could I understand from you and Elizabeth again, for businesses applying for the phase 3, their businesses have to have been established before when?
believe it's February 15th of 2020. It might be February
Perfect.
15th, but I'm pretty sure it's
Just
February
wanted to make
15th.
sure because that's another crucial part. Some had just been in the startup mode, so I want them to understand that that's the cutoff there.
Yeah, February 15th, in existence and operational.
Perfect.
Right, operational. That's a really important word there. It's not just filing and organized; it's operational.
Yes, that's exactly it, Tim. That's exactly what I was hinting on. So another question that has a little bit of intricacy behind it. I want to make sure all of our attendees are heard here. Even though they opened in 2015, we didn't start working till October of 2019. They did 200K in 3 months, but putting down 200K makes 2019 look low compared to this year. So we did about 70K per month last year. Now we're down 30K per month. But because we started so late last year, our application will look lopsided and it will look like we make more now than we did last year. Can you advise?
I think that'll be okay because your monthly run rate, if again, it's probably going to trigger a manual review. It'll take you a little longer, but that should be okay.
So just
if your monthly average is down, whatever it was just said, 70 to 30 or something, that'll.
Perfect, Maurice. So yeah, just move forward. That's the attendee. Just move forward and see what the response will be.
Yep.
Edna Rashid has asked, if a business is in a mixed-use zone and is in a detached structure with a home office, how do you classify?
Off the top of my head, I don't know the answer to that question. I think home-based businesses are eligible, so it's not an eligibility question. If they don't have a commercial location, they're going to have to apply as a home-based business. Again, and then it'll be based on how many employees they have, which bucket they're in. But there's not an eligibility issue there.
Perfect. And just again, not eligible. Just be honest and clear in your application, in your pre-registration.
Mm-hmm.
So LaShonda has asked, I was denied for a grant and loan from the EDA. I'm a female minority. Will I have a better chance in phase 3? I'm registered and in good standing.
Yeah, if that's new, if you've gotten registered and cleaned up any issues you might have had with labor or elsewhere in between phase 2 and phase 3, then if everything else checks out, then you could and should be in good shape. Again, if there was something else, if there are, I think Elizabeth went through this, there are some questions on like if you gambling, for example.
Yeah.
That's not a great example. If you are there's like inventory resale businesses that are not eligible, like odd lots businesses that are for some reason by state statute not eligible. Just if you are in that business then and you're in that business now, you're going to have the same problem.
Yeah, and I think you're just making sure that you get in as early as possible on the date that your application opens, depending on which bucket you fell into, whether that's the micro business, the restaurants, or the other bucket. Because just like the other ones, we may very well be oversubscribed on these, so you want to be first in line.
Thank you so much for that, Elizabeth. I think that's pertinent. I'm making sure to like hit these chat buttons and making sure that they get their answers here because they're really great. This actually rounds out our questions here, which is from Lou Pacifico. They have a franchise business with 2 storefronts. Each have their own EINs, bank accounts, and addresses. However, employees are paid by a management company. So they are 2 separate businesses, but they've been paid by a mutual management company. Can I apply for each storefront or only once for the management company? That's a unique question.
It's a very unique question. I would hesitate to give too definitive an answer because it's a very specific set of circumstances. The 2 things I'd say: one, if you're using if the management company is a payroll company, if you use there's
ADP.
Yeah, there's other temporary third-party employment agencies that people work with. There's a word for it. I'm blanking on it. That is fine. They wouldn't be applying. You'd be applying. It's basically the simple rule is it's how many you can apply once per EIN. So if you have 2 EINs, go for twice. If it's a holding company that has its own EIN that owns those 2 things, that would probably be 1 EIN that's the holding company.
Perfect.
But I would encourage that questioner maybe to send our customer care line an email about that because that's a very specific. And I might not have gotten that perfectly right, and I might not have perfectly understood the question. So
Perfect. So Lou, just letting you know that customer care line and email is available to you in the chat. So just make
Yeah.
sure that you go over there to explore that fully. Just a comment from Angela Pekalski says, if you guys need help, I'll offer my services. The EDA is in a state of open, looking at bringing on people currently, correct?
We're hiring for grant reviewers for, like, I think that's the technical term. Sure, yeah.
So Angela, if that's what you're looking for, where could they find that information, Tim and Elizabeth?
That's posted on our website at njeda.com under the hiring or job postings portal.
Perfect.
Yeah. And we tweeted it last night, I believe. So if you follow us on Twitter, I think
Perfect.
Rachel.
And Rachel's
I think
put that in the chat for
Rachel,
you.
as if on Q, our social media guru, helps us out with that. Thank you, Rachel.
Well, I want to thank you, Tim and Elizabeth, for doing this work. It's around this time that I would tell everybody on the small business owners. I am really fortunate to work with you all and see firsthand behind the scenes how dedicated you are for small business owners. I am a small business owner. I can't be more appreciative for the moment where you guys are giving this. They're on a gauntlet run, everybody, of webinars, trying to make sure they answer everyone's questions. To our president, chamber presidents, for those who might not have known about these chambers, this is your opportunity as small business owners. It is important to look at your networks and to band together and to look at leaders like John Harmon, Joseph Renga, Francisco Cortes, Luis de la Hoz, who do the work every day behind the scenes with no spotlight. Look to them because they truly every day work for your betterment, for your visibility, and for moments like this, because a lot of the work that the EDA is doing is in a call to collaboration, and they have given direct feedback on your behalf. So without you voicing to the chamber and being members, then they can't do the advocacy work that is so sorely needed. I would love to give it to Tim and Elizabeth to say final words of anything that they would want the attendees here to know. I think I know what Tim's going to say, but I'm muting myself.
Give me a hard time, Dina. No. So I'm going to say the thing you thought I was going to say. You got to pre-register. If you do not pre-register, you're not getting a grant. Your application it won't exist. You cannot apply. You won't be technologically able to apply without pre-registering. You may have the most needy circumstances and the most sympathetic case in the world for why you need help. But if you do not pre-register, there's nothing we can do for you. Please pre-register. cv.business.nj.gov. Please get the word out. If for folks who lead their own organizations or have business network colleagues who need to hear about this as well. I know we recorded this. We recorded a few of the other ones that have been done in the last couple of days. Please feel free to reach out. You can find us 24/7 on social and on on our website. But please feel free to reach out to our customer care line as well, and our email box for that. So thank you. And again, if you're taking the time to listen to this, it means you're probably dealing with in very real time the economic crisis that's been spawned by this public health crisis. So most importantly, good luck, not just in this grant process, but good luck and whatever we can do to be supportive from Governor Murphy on down within the administration. We will do our best to do it, because the state's economic recovery from this is going to be carried on the backs of how the small business part of our economy recovers, rise or fall. And these programs are important. We need more of them. We need the feds to step up and continue to provide resources, by the way. So if you have anyone's ear in Washington on either side of the aisle or either branch of government, please encourage them to give us the states, more resources to do more programming, because small business needs it. We know that. With that, I'll say goodnight and wish everyone a happy pre-registration, which I would strongly encourage you to do because it's mandatory. And have a great night.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Gentlemen, chamber members, if you'd like to say goodnight, I'm going to end our webinar now for everyone.
Good night, everyone. Thank you.
Thanks, Medina.
Great job, Medina.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good night. Let me go eat my fish.
Thank you.
Excellent, Medina. Great night.
Good night.